The Washington Wizards finally made a good trade. Recently, the Wizards were able to acquire Jordan Poole in a deal where they only sent out Chris Paul. And after trading away their two stars in Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis earlier on, and getting a grand total of 0 first-round picks, I finally feel as if this Jordan Poole deal was a good one for Washington. And now, at least the Wizards have someone they can build around, as they're clearly going in the direction of a rebuild once again. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicySports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Washington Wizards have been a struggling team for a decent amount of time now. It seems like every single season, either they make the playoffs and lose in the first round, or they just miss the playoffs entirely. But the worst part about this is it's pretty clear that the Wizards are still trying to win, or at least were still trying to win, as they just recently re-signed their star player in Bradley Beal, and this previous season they also made a move to bring in Kristaps Porzingis in an effort to not only make the playoffs, but also be somewhat successful once they got there. But after struggling once again after making those moves this season, it seems like finally the Wizards front office decided it was time for a change. As at this point, the Wizards are finally going in the direction of a full rebuild, as they just moved on from both of their star players in trading away Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis. Now, although I do think it's positive that the Wizards are going in the direction of a rebuild, I think it's been time for the last couple seasons at this point, the actual moves that they ended up making, I'm not necessarily the biggest fans of. As when you trade a player away of the caliber of Bradley Beal, I would personally expect you to get at least 2 first-round picks in return from him. But in that deal for Beal, not only did they not receive 2 first-round picks in return, but they actually received a total of 0 first-round picks in return for Bradley Beal. They did receive a bunch of pick swaps, but in my opinion, I don't really see those as all that valuable. I would like to receive first-round picks in return for a player of that caliber. And in the Kristaps Porzingis trade, I also didn't think they got all that much value in return, and overall I just wasn't all that happy with the moves the Wizards were making up until that point, until the Jordan Poole trade. Just recently, the Wizards traded away Chris Paul in return for Jordan Poole, Patrick Baldwin, Ryan Rollins, a 2023 protected first round pick, and a 2027 second round pick. Now this deal I'm actually a huge fan of, but the question is why? Why do I think the addition of Jordan Poole is such a great deal for Washington? Well, I actually think so for a couple different reasons, but the first reason that I want to touch upon is the Wizards are finally bringing in a player that they could build around. Now, when you look at Jordan Poole, it's pretty clear that this guy is an extremely talented young player, and in my opinion, I see him as an all-star caliber guy in the future. When you look at his overall game, it's pretty clear that he's an extremely skilled young player. Talking about his three-point shooting ability, this is definitely probably the best aspect of his game, as Jordan has a really nice ability to hit that catch and shoot three-point jump shot while also creating for himself, and even has a capability to shoot from very deep. But from that three-point range, Jordan has a great ability to cross over into a three-point jump shot, sidestep or step back, and even has a capability to hit very contested three-point jump shots. Now, one negative that I will say about his three-point shooting ability is at times Jordan has a propensity to take bad shots as well. And there have been a bunch of times with the Warriors that Jordan took poor three-point jump shots and ended up losing games for Golden State. Now, although that obviously is a negative, Jordan Poole still is a pretty young player out there, and sometimes what we see with younger guys is they have the propensity to take poor looks. But I think as the years do progress for Jordan, and as he gets more experience under his belt, I think he will mature eventually, and he's going to slowly stop taking those poor looks. But moving on to his mid-range shooting ability, this is also a really nice aspect of his game, as Jordan also has a lot of those same abilities that he does from that three-point range in terms of the catch and shoot, crossover, sidestep, and step back, but he also has a really nice one dribble pull-up alongside with a pretty nice post turnaround fadeaway. But once driving all the way to the basket, this is also a really good aspect of Jordan's game, as he does have a decent amount of athleticism out there and has a capability to dunk over players at times, but what he does most of the time is finishing around players with crafty layups, either his his left to right hand, and even has the strength and athleticism to finish through contact with N1 finishes. And I would say on all three levels of the game, Jordan Poole is just an extremely talented young scorer out there, and I only see him getting better with time. So I think just solely based off his great scoring ability alone, I think it's a great young player to add to your team for Washington. But also when you talk about the capability of him improving in other aspects of his game as well, like his passing and playmaking ability alongside with his defense and rebounding, I do think there still is a ton of upside with this guy. And I think this deal was definitely a home run due to the amount of talent this player has. Now the next reason for why I really like this Jordan Poole trade is the actual deal itself. As the Wizards only gave up Chris Paul, that's it. And although Chris Paul obviously still has a lot of talent, and although he is getting older, he still is a very valuable guy out there. When you talk about where the Wizards are at this current point, Chris Paul just makes no sense on the roster. And he was definitely a guy that either was going to get bought out or was going to get dealt. He probably was not going to stay on Washington. So the fact that the Wizards were able to move on from a player that they probably would have otherwise either dealt or bought out, and they were able to get a player of the caliber of Jordan Poole, is just a home run deal for them. And when you also consider the fact that they did also get a first round pick in return, I really do like that deal. And in terms of the future for the Wizards, I do actually think it would be somewhat determined by the play of Jordan Poole. Because I'm not necessarily saying that Jordan is going to be the best player on Washington for the next 10 or so seasons, but I think if he improves his game significantly in Washington, the Wizards as a team are then in turn going to play a little bit better, and then maybe free agents would want to come during free agency. Maybe the Wizards front office would be a little bit more aggressive in trading for other guys that could help them win right now. And overall, I do think it would put them in a much better situation than they are at currently. Because when you look at the Wizards roster, although they do have some nice players on their team, they don't necessarily have the most talent on the roster, at least currently at this point. So I do think it's crucial for the Wizards to continue to build through the draft at this point, and whatever success they have next season would be a bonus. Of course, you aren't expecting them to be all that good next year, but if some of their younger players could play well, and Jordan Poole specifically can play well, and maybe even get a little bit better from where he was this season, of course that would be a win, and that would mean the Wizards would finally be headed in the right direction. And hopefully for Washington's sake, they are able to be headed in that right direction. As I mentioned, for the past probably 5 or 6 seasons, they just haven't had all that much success whatsoever. So even if the Wizards don't make the playoffs this season, if they're just able to have a respectable season and some of their younger guys are just able to play pretty well out there, I do think it would be a pretty successful year for Washington, and at that point it would signify that they are actually headed in the right direction. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening with the Wizards and their young players in the future. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the addition of Jordan Poole to this otherwise young team was a good one for Washington, or do you think the Wizards probably should have held on to Chris Paul for his wisdom and his overall good play for those younger guys on the roster as well? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.